Good morning, Shaun Aquiline here. I'm your host of the Revelstoke Mayor Report, and in the studio with me is Mayor Gary Sulz. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Shaun.
So let's get right into what we obviously need to talk about, which is the press release that the city put out on Friday about another CAO leaving the city.
Yep. Mr. Thackeray is no longer serving as the CAO for the city of Revelstoke.
So I'd like to go over who we've had over the last several years. So we have had Tim Palmer, Alan Chabot, Ron Matuzzi serving as interim CAO, Don Lowe, Chris Marshall, who was hired and then changed his tune, and then James Thackeray was hired in the fall of 2021 and is now no longer with the city. Why are these CAOs spinning out of this community so fast? What can you say about this, recognizing that there are legalities surrounding personnel matter?
You know, I actually have checked with our legal people to say, our community wants to know what's going on, Shaun. And they basically said, this is what I can say, nothing. He's no longer with this city because everybody has a right to privacy. So there are privacy laws here in the country of Canada, and that privacy trumps anything that I can say. So I am legally bound to say nothing. Anyone in my seat would be in the same position, right? I want the community to know that. We can also extend that to private enterprise. If someone had someone working for them, whether they were released or the person left, it's not like that management team can go out to the community and say, hey, they're no longer here, because now they're infringing on the rights of that employee. So we're kind of stuck in that momentum. We know things are going on, what's going on, but I'm legally bound to not be able to say anything.
Fair enough. But as a 40-year veteran of Revelstoke, you have to understand that when we hear that, it sounds like, oh, it's an excuse and it's hiding behind some big, massive turmoil or situation that was so catastrophic, or a fight between yourself and a CAO. Or do you understand what I'm driving at?
Oh, absolutely. I totally get that. And, I look at that frustration as well. And I'm going like, so it makes it look like the mayor's on a rampage and everybody that ends up in City Hall is going to get canned because they don't get along. And that's not the case. And so if there was ever a decision to let a staff member go, in this case, the only staff member that council has is a CAO. And that decision, if they were to ever say we need to let somebody go, it requires 2/3 of the council to vote in favor of that sort of thing. It's not a mayor's decision. It's not an individual council's decision. For me personally, anything that happens is working with council. And so for me, I'm looking at my council as we work, whether we work through short-term rentals that we're dealing with now, or we're dealing with zoning bylaws, whatever. We discuss it around the table. I get one vote, they get one vote, everybody gets one vote. And that's kind of how that system works.
Now, the relationship between council and, we'll call it senior city staff, or any city staff member for that, seems to be toxic. Talk to me about toxicity. Explain to me why we think that this is happening. What is it coming from? Are you and council meddling more into day-to-day operations that's causing these big fights? Are there fights? Why do we keep hearing about this?
There's probably some tension between some staff members as they work through things. Definitely when we talk about mayor and council, our job's not to get involved in the running of the city. That's not what we're here to do. That doesn't mean that we might not challenge that staff member in a council meeting as to their concerns or our concerns. Sometimes staff members get very passionate about the thing that they're bringing to council, and council in turn is impassioned about the item that's there, and there'll be some disagreements. At the end of the day, it's just a decision. It's not like we're putting that staff member down and saying, hey, this is the way it has to be. We make a decision. We make the decision based on what we as council think is going to be the best for the community. But we have to follow legislation as well, right? So we look at that and go forward. Do I believe there's toxicity in the city of Revelstoke? I do not believe. Do I know that we've had some people who've had issues with that? Absolutely. But I think And I feel in my heart that we have gone past that sort of thing. You know, when I say to staff, is there an issue? Do you have an issue with me? Do you have an issue with council? Do you have an issue with each other? And if they have an issue with each other, then we encourage them to work out their difficulties, because I am the leader or the mayor. It looks as if I'm the one that's causing the issue, and that's not factual.
Now, if you do have two city staff members that have a difficulty coming to an agreement, how do you navigate that problem if it does get a little bit spicier than it ought to be?
Well, and that's where the CAO would come in. The CAO is the manager of the city, so the job of the CAO is to work out those difficulties between those staff members, and that's what they're intended to do.
Are there legal matters that come into City Hall? Are there lawyers that have to come in and step in and placate these matters between city staff members?
Anything where legal would get involved is if there's an official complaint of some sort, and then if there's this official complaint over something, so if that official complaint comes, it would go from whoever the person that's making the complaint would go to their manager and then to the CAO. If it's not resolved, then it may get the mayor involved. It's rare. If there's any other complaints that come forward that would come directly to me, then I have to act on it, and then I would have to basically say we need to have someone from outside the organization look at this and deal with this.
And has that happened?
It has happened, yes.
So when you bring in an outside lawyer to come in and navigate these concerns or issues, what then?
Well, they deal with it. They basically, it's independent of us. They would look at it. They would look at the whole complaint process. Is it a valid complaint? So they have to listen to everybody concerned, and then they would make a judgment. And the judgment would basically be whatever they decide, whether, yep, there's some things, here's a course of remediation that you have to deal with, or there's no validity to the statement. And out of these complaints, there was nothing that was substantiated.
And has that led to departure of staff?
You know, some staff, they're not happy with what the end result is, and they may leave. And sometimes when we talk about staff leaving, in this day and age when people are moved around, quite often I'm seeing companies come in that headhunt staff. So we've had things like that happen where somebody's coming in and going like, well, they're pretty decent at their job. We're going to pay them more money and try and entice them to come to our city. And we've seen that sort of thing happen.
Now, let me ask you a question about city staff coming in. Now, when you put out to tender a job,
right,
some of the applications that you see for certain positions, do you notice that they are, and this is not by any stretch an insult, but maybe junior, or they have 25 years experience, or is it they find they have 5 years experience? Do you find that Revelstoke is somewhat of a way station in terms of career?
Oh, absolutely. And here's some reasoning behind that. And so people can come in that have a junior standing in whatever it is, whether it's planning, engineering, whatever. And it's a great way to build up the resume. And then they move on because there's greener pastures somewhere else. Sometimes the junior people will come here for the lifestyle. So people want to come here to ski. And then after a while, they may go like, okay, I'm in a relationship with someone now. I want to put down roots, and they're going to move to another community. And so they're always looking for another opportunity to move on. That doesn't mean they don't like the city. They're just looking for another opportunity, an increase in wages, a different lifestyle, that sort of thing. So we see that. Now, we do see people come with the senior, and they're going to be here for a period of time, but they know that for them, this may be either precursor to semi-retirement or retirement as they come in. Those sorts of things happen as well. We have just a broad spectrum of people coming to the community for different things. It happens.
Now, we all know the market is what it is. I'm talking about the housing market. And I know you can't talk about someone's personal life in vague terms. Could you at least indicate or address if any of the staff that may have left have indicated it was they could not find a home ever?
That's kind of an ongoing issue, Shaun, with staff that are always looking. And I'm always concerned about longevity for staff when they're not able to find housing. So we feel we pay top dollar for our staff. But still, you look at what's available for housing, and people are going, it takes double income to survive. If there's a blip in that income, things make it hard. So housing will always play an issue in how we retain staff.
Do you think that you, representing the city, can honestly say the communication from the city to the community is phenomenal, good, subpar, or not at all?
I'm going to say at this point, I feel that we're not doing a good job. If you want to level that, it's subpar. And here's why I'm going to say that. Our staff is doing what they can to get the communication out. We need a dedicated communications person because we have so many staff doing this on the side of their desk. And it's just not robust. It's not the way it should be. Questions will come in and the staff will go, who has the ability to answer this question? Every once in a while, that question gets missed or it doesn't have a proper answer.
Well, with that said, that would involve a payment of a communications director. And that would also be, I don't know what a communications director would make, but I am thinking it's probably not cheap.
I don't have any sense of what it would be. I mean, I could estimate, it's going to be 80,000, 100,000, 120,000. It could be a lot less than that. It could be a lot more than that. I have no idea. And so I've never looked at, what does, Joe Blow, the communication officer of the city of Kelowna get? I have no idea. And, my understanding is for a city that size, there's multiple communication officers. So how do we rate how that works? We just know that we need to be doing a better job, and we're going to work on how we get that out there.
Could that be something that comes down the pike, a real serious discussion between mayor, council, and city about hiring a communications director? And obviously that would have to come to the community to be clear on that, and that it does come at a cost, which does mean taxpayer money. However, what do you want? Clarity, communication, and someone that's constantly on the social media cycle and on the press releases and all the other fun stuff that comes with that, or we keep it as is. So is that something that could be brought forward, especially as we move towards spring, summer, fall? And guess what's happening in fall, Gary? Do you know?
Well, we have that election coming up, and, we need to look at those sorts of things. So definitely this is a conversation piece for council, for staff. How do we make communication work? And do we need a separate communications person? And in my mind, yes. And so we need to figure out how we can do that. How is that going to work in our budget? Do we have those constraints? And we haven't even talked about, we're in a budget process now, but we haven't even talked about that sort of thing at this point.
Now, one final question about the CAO, and then we'll wrap it up. And that question is, Gary, as current mayor right now, what are you going to do to track, seek, and find a CAO that will stick around, that will be of a benefit to the city, a benefit to you and council, and a benefit to the greater community?
Well, right now we need to put someone in for the interim so that we have a leader, and we need someone who's experienced to be able to do that.
Oh, I've heard Ron Matuzzi can do that.
Ron, we're grateful for Ron for all that he's done. And he's still there. He's definitely helping us and guiding us as we move forward. But he has time constraints because he's doing some work for the province and doing the city of Lytton.
That'll be a big challenge.
It's a big challenge for him. And we're extremely grateful for that. But we need to look at someone who has a vast array of experience. How are they going to be able to work? Do they understand the housing situation here in the community? Do they understand our weather? Do they understand the fact that, we don't see sunny skies for weeks on end? All of those things can play in how people fit into our community. So it will be a whole array of things that we need to look at.
Gary, thank you for taking the time to chat with me about this. I'm going to add on after this mayor report. I did an interview with Allison Habkirk, who teaches public administration for both Capilano College and the University of Victoria. She's worked for over 50 municipalities in BC. She served as mayor and council for the District of Central Saanich, who studies this and teaches this and has had a great discussion with me about the CAO position, why there's rotation going on in British Columbia, and the problem, the systemic problem that's going on because of that. I'm going to add that on so that people can have a chance to hear her version of it from an outside perspective, but not just about Revelstoke, but about BC as a greater whole.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
You are listening to CKCR Revelstoke. I'm your host, Shaun Aquiline, and on the phone with me is Allison Habkirk, who teaches public administration for both Capilano College and the University of Victoria. She's worked for over 50 municipalities in British Columbia and served as mayor and on council for the District of Central Saanich. Hello, Allison, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Now, one concern I think any community would have, including our own, is that we often pay out CAOs. So has it always been that way to rotate CAOs this frequently?
No, I think it has over the last couple of decades become more common. I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, CAOs might have had a lifelong career in a municipality. But more recently, there's been more turnover. The other factor that's really important in this is that the baby boom generation is pushing out of the workforce, and so there's genuinely a shortage of CAOs across the province. So I think there is a career motivation to move around, and I think that that's probably more prevalent in smaller communities. I don't think anybody's motivated by being let go and being paid out. It could be career limiting to be let go. I don't think that's a real motivation.
Now, when a CAO leaves their position, or any senior staff member for that matter, generally the community wants to know what happened and why. It's their tax dollars at work, and there's this collective community of people that want to know what's being spent and, of course, why. How can any city, not just this one, but any city or municipality, share important information that, albeit is sensitive to the departing person, without being held liable?
I suppose both parties, both the council and the senior staff member, could agree to release reasons. Generally, if they're getting some kind of a payout, if they're leaving and they're getting a payout, it's done without cause. So there's no cause for termination. If somebody is terminated with cause, then there's not going to be a payout. Usually, it's the prerogative of the council to terminate the senior staff member. And in order to do that, if they don't have cause, they need to persuade them with money. You could agree to release the reasons. I think if you look at some of the recent examples, Saanich is a good example where the CAO moved on and the council said, we were going in a different direction.
Do you find with a new mayor and new council, that's often when this thing can happen or when this shift changes? It's a new, fresh idea, and so there's this idea of new mayor, new council, new CAO, new direction, new mission.
What I'd like to say first about that is that we live in this and work in a system where it's a nonpartisan civil service. I mean, our country nationally and provincially and locally is dependent on a politically neutral public service. And if you look at the codes of conduct and codes of ethics for public servants in Canada, they're all committed to a nonpartisan public service. So you would expect public servants to be able to continue to work irrespective of what political leaning the elected body has. And I think that's really important for us to understand and to appreciate. But having said that, there has been a tendency over the last 10 to 20 years for new councils to want to hire their own CAO. And so we looked for, about 5 years ago, I looked for some empirical evidence to support that, and there does seem to be some evidence that after elections there is a slight elevation in the turnover of CAOs. I think that there is a lack of appreciation that really if you have a competent, mature, experienced, seasoned CAO, they should be able to serve whatever elected council is in place at the time, and it really shouldn't matter.
Now, the design of mayor and council is to have one employee, if you will. That employee
Right.
is that intermediary. Now, does the system, do you think, still work? Like, are elected officials more involved in the day-to-day operations than ever before, and is that a good thing?
There's a long history to the one employee model, and I think there are some very good reasons for it. You only want one leader. You don't want multiple leaders, and so I think generally that system is well regarded and virtually universally embraced in British Columbia, so that the direction of council comes through the CAO, and the CAO oversees the staff of the organization. So no, I think we won't probably be going away from that system anytime soon, and the last thing you want is 7 council members individually giving direction to more junior staff or staff below the CAO. You can just imagine the kind of chaos that would involve. And if I can just add too, and you really need somebody who's seasoned and experienced in that CAO role. Like in Revelstoke, for example, I think the annual budget is something in the neighborhood of $27 million. You have about $85 million of capital assets. I mean, this is a big organization, delivering just a myriad of services, everything from water to sewer treatments to roads to yoga classes. And you need a really seasoned leader to actually be able to oversee the delivery of those services and also support an elected body.
What factors are playing in a role in so many other municipalities similar to our community, struggling to seek out a CAO and keep them from that long haul and execute a balanced socio-ecological system?
Well, I think in a community like Revelstoke, that I'm an outsider, but these would be my outsider's observations, is there's a lot of pressure on your community right now. There's a lot of change in your community, and that causes a lot of conflict and a feeling of unease in the community. And Revelstoke is not alone in this. I think that amount of change really stresses a community. And it therefore also stresses the elected officials because they probably wear a lot of it, and they are responsible for managing that change. That's their job. And in providing services to accommodate that change, you probably have financial stresses just in terms of maintaining capital assets, staffing. That all is added pressure on the council and on the organization. And I think it makes it, a challenging place to work. And again, Revelstoke's not alone in this. You see this across a good number of communities in the province where there's lots of change, there's lots of stress, and it's really hard on a municipal organization, I think.
And one of the articles you shared with me from the LGMA, it talked a little bit about one area when friction topic is often rate of pay for senior staff. It can be high, and that can cause a lot of tension between the community, wondering why is it so high, what are they doing, and there's this back and forth. This can't possibly be simply Revelstoke. I can't imagine that other smaller areas similar to us, that they're not feeling these types of burdens too. Is that always the case, that the rate of pay for staff always seems to cause tension for the community paying the taxes?
I think that's true. One would want to think about is you're looking to hire, really an experienced professional who can run the corporation of Revelstoke, and to oversee, a fair staff, and to make sure that the water's running and the toilet is flushing and the roads are smooth, and along with all your recreation services and all the other services you deal, like you're looking for. I mean, this is my recommendation to communities, is you want to look for somebody who is an experienced, seasoned, mature leader to lead the organization. And in order to get somebody like that, especially in the current employment market, you're going to have to pay them, especially if you're asking them to come to a smaller community where the cost of living is high. Their spouse might have to leave their job. They might have children that they have to uproot and bring to a new school. So you're going to have to compensate somebody well to get the kind of person that you need to run, a substantial sized organization.
Have you found over your years that some communities that were quite small for many years grew incredibly fast, almost too fast, where it was really hard to maintain? Was there just so much growth so fast in some of these smaller communities that it was hard to keep up?
Oh, without question. Coupled with all of those things, you have growth, so you usually have an in-migration of people from someplace else, and small towns across BC are really experiencing this out-migration from the Lower Mainland. You can sell your house for a couple $1 million in on the west side of Vancouver and move to Cranbrook and buy a house for under $100,000. So, and the pandemic only accelerated that. So there's good evidence to acknowledge that pressure that is, we've felt in small communities over the last couple of years especially. And they've had to adjust. But on top of that is you see local governments now having to not just provide the traditional services, water, sewer, and roads, but now, with the provincial government, shifting responsibilities to local governments, all of a sudden, local governments are responsible for affordable housing or not-for-profit housing, or they're responsible for social services, homelessness, all these things that traditionally in British Columbia have not been a part of local government are now, the expectation by the public, I would suggest, is that local government delivers these services. Lots of small communities don't have the kind of staff to deal with homelessness or drug addiction or housing affordability. I mean, that's beyond the scope of what has traditionally been the responsibilities of local government, but it is now the expectation, even in small communities, and I suspect in your community of Revelstoke, affordable housing is a real challenge.
It's a regular ongoing issue. Do you find that social media and the freedom of comments, special interest groups, and the media coverage play a role in departures, as well as the lack of maybe communication between community and the city itself?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And if you talk to elected officials and if you talk to senior staff these days, that's one of the hardest parts of being a part of local government, is just the social media is just toxic, absolutely toxic.
Well, that was one of my other questions for you was, do you hear of other toxicity within other municipalities, and is this just a common thread line?
Yeah, sadly it is. And I have just seen some unbelievable social media posts. In my time as an elected official, I was at the pointy end of some sticks that were really, really hurtful and challenging, and I had younger children at the time, and I really had to protect my children. I'm there to serve my community. I certainly wasn't getting rich doing it. The kind of abuse was terrible, and it's only gotten worse. Suggests that people just put themselves in the shoes of some of these people that they're attacking. And, you go home after a late council meeting and you open a Facebook page and you see just awful, awful things said about you. It must be very, very hard, both for the staff and for the elected officials. And it only makes what is already a challenging environment worse. I think local governments are working hard to figure out how to deal with some of the toxic environment on social media.
One of the issues, of course, is when you're dealing in personnel matters, whether it's within a municipality or if it's working for a company and it's protected, even though if we see a release and we see, there was a payout, the city can't comment on any of that, which can cause the community to be frustrated because there goes another CAO or there goes a staff member, and yet the city can't comment on it because of these confidentiality laws and, of course, privacy, which then creates this concept of we're not communicating to anybody, or they're feeling like they're not being communicated to.
I understand that frustration. People have the right to not have their employment history made public. That's not likely to change in the near future. I think where where local governments want to head is they want to work diligently to reduce the staff turnover. What you want in local government is boring local government. You want it to be really calm, steady, and smooth. Provide your services, do the work that the citizens expect you to do, and not attract a lot of media attention. In those communities that are under a lot of stress, I think openly communicating with the public and really, really working on attracting particularly senior staff that will stay, will work diligently to carry out the work of the council. That ought to be your goal.
What would you suggest to the cities to do to allow the community to feel like they're informed?
Really having regular communication with the community, so whether that's on their webpage, regular media releases, town hall meetings where the public can come and ask us anything kind of thing. Really working on that communication so that people feel that they know what's going on, and also importantly, the public feels that they're heard, they're being heard. That comes with a cost, though. That's the other thing, is you see these small communities having to hire communications people because, your engineer or planner, that's not their area of specialty, right? So I think proactive, regular communication can really go a long ways to helping communities. Kind of regular reporting. I mean, every community is obligated to produce an annual report, but regular reporting on what's going on in council. Some councils produce after every meeting a very simple summary of the key decisions that are made or the key topics that were discussed. I think doing that, getting, the municipalities' information out so that there's some factual information out there can be one or two good steps towards trying to kind of calm the community. If you're in a community that's undergoing a lot of change, that's going to be a handful to deal with for sure.
Well, we've been chatting with Allison Habkirk from the Capilano College and University of Victoria, where she teaches public administration. Thank you for taking the time to give us your expertise and thoughts on high turnover of CAOs and just the political landscape in British Columbia all over.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for asking.